Well, good evening. My name is Michael Byers, and this is a Salt Spring Forum video event. And I'm very pleased to introduce our guest this evening, who is Lawrence Martin, the Washington, D.C. based columnist for the Globe and Mail. If you're watching this, you already know about his distinguished history in journalism, and you've probably read his many columns from D.C. and before that from Ottawa, from Moscow, and before that from Washington, D.C. He's been around for a couple of decades. He knows people, he has access, and that's why we wanted him here tonight. Lawrence, you were a guest of the Salt Spring Forum. In fact, our first ever guest almost a decade ago. And I remember on that occasion, Stephen Harper was still Prime Minister, and you told us things about Stephen Harper and the Harper government that were well known within Ottawa, but not so well known in the rest of the country. And I'm just wondering whether you remember that conversation. And in that context, I'm hoping that you'll tell us some inside information from Washington as well this evening.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Harper years, yeah, I covered them. I wrote a book about that. In fact, he's been in the news lately. He was talking about, how terrible it is not to have a Fox News in Canada, and how Fox News is his favorite network, which is, I guess, not all that surprising, but extraordinary for a Canadian Prime Minister to have Fox News as his favorite television network. So, and he's been away out of office for quite a while, but he hasn't changed. He seems a little bit just angered or bitter at having been knocked over by Justin Trudeau, and wants to keep his oar in there a little bit, and is involved in many conservative organizations around the world.
Now, I understand that Mr. Harper has access to the Trump White House. Do you see him playing a role in Canada-U.S. relations right now? He obviously is also playing a role in the conservative leadership race in Canada. Some of our members have actually sent in questions, and a couple of them actually wanted to know whether Stephen Harper is essentially working for the Republican Party right now, vis-a-vis things in Canada.
My contacts there and at the Canadian Embassy, his name really hasn't come up. So if he is doing something, it's very furtively. It wouldn't be surprised. He has a lot of conservative contacts down there, a lot of contacts in the Republican Party. He hasn't really spoken out much about Donald Trump, in the sense that, Donald Trump, even for Canadian conservatives, is very difficult to say anything positive about, right? I mean, Trump's popularity rating in Canada is about 20%. I mean, about 80% of Canadians would like to get kicked out of office. So for a Stephen Harper or a Peter MacKay or prominent conservatives to come out and they want to ignore Donald Trump as much as possible. So if he is doing something for them, he wouldn't want to broadcast it, I don't think, because it wouldn't do any good for his image, would it?
No, I don't imagine it would. I'd like to switch to a topic that's on everyone's mind right now, and that is the question of who will be Joe Biden's running mate. I've seen you expressing some views on this matter on Twitter. What can you tell our audience tonight? We'll probably take this interview.
It's a good day to talk about that, because I think the leading candidate was Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota. And this is extremely important, okay, because Joe Biden is a very good chance of becoming president. Joe Biden's vice president pick has a very good chance of becoming president, because he will step down after 4 years, probably. The vice president might take over in the interim or at that point. So this is a huge thing. Amy Klobuchar, I think, was Joe Biden's favorite in terms of her personality, in terms of getting along, in terms of policy accommodation in terms of the accommodation of their views with one another. Coming from Minnesota is a good state out there to geographically speaking for him. But you know what happens? We see this horrendous development in Minneapolis with the death of the African American at the hands of the suffocating knee of this policeman. It's caused a big furor, as it should. It was a murder. It was, a videotape. Mm-hmm. He asphyxiated him. Never seen anything like it. Amy Klobuchar has got a record as a prosecutor in Minnesota of going easy on white policemen in cases against African Americans. This might very well knock her out of the vice presidential race, because this event is getting so much publicity. It will continue to go on and on. I mean, they're still protesting. They'll be protesting for a long time. This man is going to be charged, I would think, with murder. And Joe Biden is, to pick Amy Klobuchar with her record in Minnesota, which she disputes, would be probably a mistake. So, where do you go from her? This is just a terrible event for her. And then you have, I think, the second logical candidate is Kamala Harris from California, the senator who did not do well in the primary. She backed out before the event even started. The African American vote obviously would be a big plus to having her on the team. She's from California, which really, that's a lock for the Democrats anyway, right? She's got that disadvantage. She's quite strong, quite articulate. I'm not sure. She's the one who took down Joe Biden, you'll recall, for his record on busing way back in the 1970s in the first debate. She lashed out at him. That little girl was me. Remember that quote? Mm-hmm. But they apparently have gotten on better terms since then. I still wouldn't pick her as one of my as a top pick. Nor would I pick Elizabeth Warren. A lot of people are pushing her because she'd bring in the left side of the party, right? The Bernie Sanders element to unify the party, which is a big deal. Her problem is that she's 70. He's 77. Can you see the Democrats having a septuagenarian ticket?
Oh, 70 is not so old these days.
Yeah, but both? What do you think? Don't you think the GOP would ridicule them?
They're running a very old president in their campaign.
Yeah, and their vice president, Pence, is 60, I think. So still, though, two people in their 70s, I mean, that sounds pretty. Anyway, but beyond that, she's from Massachusetts, which geographically does nothing for Biden.
Yeah.
She performed horribly as a vote getter in the primaries. I mean, she didn't even get to second in one of the initial primaries. Finished third in her home state of Massachusetts. So that track record as a vote getter is not good. I don't think the personality type. Joe Biden has said, "I want somebody who's simpatico with me." I don't think her personality type is comfortable for Biden. I think Biden likes a more, shall we say, less strident sort of running mate, in that she is tremendously bright. She is tremendously quick. I really admire her brains, watching her perform in the debates and everything. But she is, come right at you, in your face, talks at you, has only one tone, talks at you, not to you. And I think that's the reason why, one of the reasons why her persona did not work in the primary. She turned people off. She's got no mix of in terms of her approach, and so I don't see her as the top pick now. So who does that leave? You have Stacey Abrams in Georgia. She's had no experience in Washington. You have the governor of Michigan, and she has been making a big splash because she's been taking on Trump. She has kept the state closed, whereas he's been pushing to open it. And she's made a big name for herself. Joe Biden speaks highly of her. She might be one to watch. And there's about, 6 or 7 other possibilities, but they're all women. He's not going to go to a man. He's said that for sure.
So Joe Biden's plans for the next week or two have been derailed by events in Minneapolis. Donald Trump's plans for this election were derailed by COVID-19. 3 months ago, he was riding high. The economy was soaring. His base was happy. He was watching the Democrats tear each other apart. Everything was looking good for Donald Trump. How has this pandemic changed the election campaign?
Well, make America sick again is what people are saying now about him. He has not done well. He just had a bad moment on the weekend where the death toll reached 100,000. Not the worst in the world per capita, but one of the worst. And we've had people say, a study just a week ago said, if he had gotten off the dime earlier on this thing, he would have saved, even a week earlier, would have saved 36,000 American lives. So he's losing that fight. Now, it's not a total loss yet. His Republican base wants to open the country again. The Democrats, prefer more leaning to the lockup side. But even if it does open up more quickly, which it is doing now, even if there isn't a big second wave from opening up, which is a big if, then I still don't think the economy is going to be have recovered by the fall at all. I still think it'll be in very bad shape. American presidents don't habitually win an election when the economy is in bad shape. You can go to, the Republicans lost in 2008 under George W. Bush when you had the global economic downfall. They lost in 1992 when his father, George H.W. Bush, said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And his lips said a different story and brought in new taxes. And the economy was in bad shape. He lost to Bill Clinton. They go to Jimmy Carter in 1980, losing to Ronald Reagan. Remember the stagflation of that period. Go back to 1932 and Herbert Hoover. So that puts him in a very difficult position. And but he's going to pull every dirty trick in the book, right?
It sometimes seems like Donald Trump is campaigning against Barack Obama. This whole Obamagate supposed scandal that the president has surfaced and used some very strong language. It's clear that Trump is obsessed with Obama. What's behind that? What are the reasons for this, and why does it figure so centrally at this point in U.S. politics?
You'll recall, this goes back to, the whole campaign to try and prove that Obama was an American, right? Finally, Obama pulled out his birth certificate. Why, Trump went on and on about this, and really, I guess I'd try to identify with Redneck America by doing this, and did so. And then Obama really got him at the big dinner in Washington, the annual correspondence dinner. He just humiliated him on this topic, about not being an American, and Donald Trump was in the audience, and I don't think he's ever forgotten that humiliation, and he was out to get Obama ever since then. He is obsessed with tearing down the Obama record because, he wants to prove himself a better president. So he will say anything about the Obama record that's total nonsense. He, president's attitude toward African Americans. There's been a lot of race baiting in his presidency. People don't call him a racist, but he sort of can be seen to, stoking that sort of prejudice in what he does a lot of times. And Barack Obama, being an African American, doesn't help his cause there. The policies he goes after on Obama are, I don't see that horrendous of a dividing line. It seems to me that Trump wants to, anything Obama does, I'm opposed to, right? And you can go through the whole list of policies. Obamagate, everybody's treating as a joke, but it's getting a lot of publicity, particularly in right-wing circles. And the Attorney General has got another probe going. Bill Barr, who's very, 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 very obsequious toward the president, got another probe going of the whole Russian probe, and whether the Democrats may have misbehaved in some regard in that. And they'll probably come up with something, and they'll make a big, huge deal of it, and this will keep the Obamagate thing rolling. And it's probably smart politics on his part to roll out this nonsense. He's going to go after Biden as well on the whole Ukraine, and Hunter Biden in the Ukraine, and Joe Biden and Hunter dealing in the Ukraine. Everybody wrote how Hunter Biden served on the board of an oil company there that was involved in all kinds of nefarious things, and he was making a fortune for apparently doing very little. And he got the job because of his contacts with Joe Biden, of course. So, and they'll make a big deal of that. And they'll be trying to pull out scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal. I just don't think it's going to work this time. I think they're going to. I think they'll keep it close right up until the fall, and then I think Americans. I have some faith in Americans here this time, Michael. I think Americans are going to say, this guy is just too much. We got to turn the page here. We can't have another 4 years of this sort of upheaval. You'll recall that you mentioned before the coronavirus outbreak that things were going well for him, right? But if you recall the polls then, even then, hypothetical matchup with Joe Biden, Biden was leading in most of those polls. In fact, almost all of those polls, and in the toss-up states as well, the big states as well. And he's still leading there. Biden has a lead in Michigan. He has a lead in Pennsylvania. He even has a narrow lead, 1 or 2 point lead in Florida, last I looked. In Wisconsin, he has a lead. Ohio, I think Trump may be 1 or 2 points ahead. But, and the overall poll shows Donald Trump, 6, 7 points behind. But the important thing about that is, Trump's polls do not move. I mean, he's going to keep the 40%. It's 40%. He never falls below 40%, no matter what he does. Mm-hmm. But he never goes ever goes above 45% or 46%, and no matter what he does. And so I don't know how he can move those numbers. Mm-hmm. I just don't see it.
In your most recent column, you called him the master of political diversion. And you were specifically pointing at the fact that he volunteered that he was taking hydroxychloroquine, this anti-malaria drug. And he made this announcement in the middle of a new scandal concerning his firing of the inspector general at the U.S. State Department, who was investigating Mike Pompeo for various things, including an $8 billion arms sale with Saudi Arabia. I mean, if he's so good at political diversion, political distraction, could you foresee him doing something even more distracting, for instance, starting a war.
Or laying some sort of criminal charge against Joe Biden.
Uh-huh.
Or starting a war, as you say. One thing about Trump, which, if there's anything you might want to admire about him, is that he is not he's not a warmonger. He's not a guy who seeks war conflict. He's had opportunities. He's pulled back. He's made the odd little strike here and there. But when he means everything to this guy, he's an egomaniac. Everybody knows that. People say he won't even leave office if he's defeated. His ego is so great he couldn't take it. So it wouldn't be beyond him to do anything in order to win. And so you can't rule that out either. A conflict even with China of some sort, because the China Cold War thing is really building up now because of the coronavirus conflict. They did have a mini agreement on trade to start the year. But they're on bad terms now. It's going to get worse. The Hong Kong thing is another element of that. And the whole economy competition with China. He wants to assert himself as a dominant world power, and who knows what he might do in that regard. I mean, it's going to be. You've seen him on Twitter. He's even more outrageous on Twitter in calling people names. He just called Obama a crook on Twitter, a proven crook. I mean, totally libelous. He'll say anything. And, a lot of people are, as you said earlier, I mean, I'm talking about that column. The Democrats, they have trouble knowing how to handle this. I mean, what do? You call the guy a liar again? How do you handle this? He dominates the airways every single day of the week. He dominates the media. The media has to follow it. I mean, you're covering a president. I'm in Washington and saying, I don't want to write a column about Trump this week. I want to write about something. But then he'll do something crazy, and you have to write about it because he's the president, the most powerful guy in the world, right? And so he'll dominate the airways, and that's a big plus.
You've mentioned the president's behavior on Twitter already. A couple of days ago, Twitter actually fact-checked Donald Trump. This was a tweet or a series of tweets concerning mail-in ballots. Trump went ballistic. He today, as we're speaking, he signed an executive order that calls for a review of legislation that it essentially gives companies like Twitter a liability shield against third-party postings on their platforms. Is this something we should be paying attention to? Is Twitter actually going to stand up to Donald Trump over the long term, or does Twitter need Trump? I mean, he's probably their most important user.
I think it's very encouraging what Twitter has done, just to put out a message that even we at Twitter think what this guy's saying is so off the wall, so wrong, so full of misinformation and disinformation that we can't put it all out. I think that's a really, really important message, a vital message, because it just cannot have the president of the United States. He's tweeting so many times a day now, filling the air with that much disinformation. I mean, something has to be done. I don't know how far Twitter will take it. I think they'll hold their guns for a while. That whole question, by the way, on the mail-in subject that you raised, is extremely important because getting back to the topic of Trump and the election, if Trump loses this election, a very good chance that he will ignore the election result and call it a fraud, launch suits against, counties, Democratic counties in Michigan about their vote counting, about illegal immigrants voting, about the mail-in votes, abuse in terms of mail-in votes. So-and-so voted 5 times and sent in five votes. He's making a huge run with this. Of course, mail-in votes are a big thing now because of the coronavirus, right? So there's going to be millions and millions and millions more mail-in votes. It really might clog up the system. It might lead to all kinds of mayhem. Some people are saying that we're not going to be in a position to count all these on the same day of the election. They're already saying that, and so we won't be able to tell you who won Pennsylvania the night of the election, a critical state, right? But Trump will explore any number of avenues to disavow an election result if it's close. I mean, if he gets wiped, I don't see how he can do it. There's also the matter of it's not the people who vote to elect a president, but it's the electors that are nominated in each individual state based on the vote, who then vote in the president. Now, in a Republican-leaning state where the president has cited subterfuge, you could get the people in that state who are organizing the Democratic electors, the governor and so on, order them not to vote for Joe Biden, even though Biden won that state. He could take it that far. The Supreme Court apparently is going to make a ruling on whether, in fact, they can do that. But this is just one of the many number of tricks of Donald Trump's sleeve that can be pulled off, including even, if there's a second wave of the coronavirus in the fall and he's losing badly in the polls, he could try and postpone the election, as they did with some primaries this year. Now, it's really, really runs up against the wall of the Constitution trying to postpone the election. But as we know with Trump, he'll do anything.
And you and I both remember Bush versus Gore.
Right.
The Supreme Court actually might find in favor of Donald Trump if these issues get to it at some stage.
Well, you're right, because as you know, the Republicans have a majority on the court right now. And that majority could increase, certainly will increase if Trump does prevail in this election. So there's so many crazy things that can happen in the next few months. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with the virus. I think public opinion is moving toward, in the United States, in favor of opening things up. The good argument being that, as in Canada, the virus, the toll of the virus is on the 65 and over. To a huge degree, that's the same in the United States. And the argument from the White House is, why should the whole economy have to pay the price when, it's unfortunately that age group that's being hit, the retirees, who do not move the economy, of course. And I think that argument is a good one for him to make, but it all depends on whether there is a second wave and whether the numbers really start to go out, ratchet up now that things are opening up. We don't know. The thing about this virus, right, is that there's so many variables. The more you know, the more you don't
know. When I look at some of Trump's statements, I look at his tweets late at night or early in the morning. I look at his trouble speaking clearly at times. I look at his obsessions, his narcissism. Is he mentally ill, or is he crazy like a fox?
Somewhere in between there. I don't think he's mentally ill. I think he has that narcissistic complex people talk about. When I've been at the White House and seen him up close, it's like I think he's pretty quick on his feet in there. It's not like he's losing control of where the facts are on certain dossiers. Mm-hmm. And he can be very engaging. He can be very charismatic. he puts out, as we've discussed earlier, a lot of wrong information, but he does have a quick recall of a lot of facts as well. So I don't think he's losing it. I think he's under, his ego is under tremendous strain, and he wakes up at night, and it's always been a case for him where if anybody takes him on, he goes crazy, right? And he fires back harder than anybody's ever fired at him, and it's worked for him throughout his career, his lawsuits and everything. He's always managed to emerge. He's got this phenomenal self-confidence. He's totally unashamed, totally shameless. I've never seen anybody like it. I've never seen anybody so confident in their own abilities in their whole life. When he boasts like that, I think he believes most of those boasts, he's absolutely unique and extraordinary. And I think unhinged is one of the better words to describe him. He's sometimes he seems a little bit detached from central command, and that can get very dangerous because he flies off the handle. He's prepared to say anything. He thinks out loud all the time, but he's got people so used to it. He's got people so used to lying and putting out falsehoods that it's not a story anymore. Anything that happens all the time is no longer news, right? And so he has made sort of lying acceptable in the sense that people say, oh, there he goes again. Well, of course he's lying, but, that's what we expect. That's what we're getting. And if you repeat the lies, they sink in to a certain degree and have effect after a while, right? The more you put out the line, the more people start to believe it.
At the beginning of his presidency, there were several very large protests on the Mall in Washington. And then they stopped long before the pandemic, right? The people weren't in the streets anymore protesting against Donald Trump. Is he driving them into complacency with this deluge of lies and constant scandals? Are people tuning out, or are people actually going to come out in waves on November 3rd and vote for Democrats?
Yeah, I think the Democratic primaries were a little bit disappointing for Democrats in that they didn't get the turnout for the primaries that they wanted. I think they were lucky that they ended up getting the moderate candidate they wanted, even though Joe Biden ran a lousy campaign.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked much about Joe Biden, but he has not been very impressive. He seems to be shaking off this Tara Reid allegations of a sexual attack back, 20 some odd years ago. Her story is zigzagged all over the place, and so there's a lot of doubt about it. But he was hit with that. It's, still in the news. I think it's, hasn't helped him. I think, Trump, speaking of being unhinged, Trump is basically hitting Joe Biden with the unhinged rap, right? And in terms of being in mental cognitive decline, is the expression. Mm-hmm. Watching Biden in the primaries and a little bit after that, I haven't noticed that. I mean, he loses train of thought, as a 77-year-old might from time to time. Although we didn't see that so much from Bernie Sanders, who basically has repeated the same lines for 40 years anyway, right? But Biden, I still think he's sharp enough. He isn't as sharp as he once was. I don't think he has to do much. I think governments defeat themselves. I think Trump is well on the way to defeating himself. I think Biden realizes that, and he just has to be careful not to make horrendous mistakes.
Is Donald Trump his own man? We've had a number of questions from Salt Spring Forum members and Tyee readers, and some of the questions I've already asked came from those sent in questions. But there are questions also, one from Bill Jeffries here, asking, who are these friends that Trump speaks to on the telephone late at night? Is he beholden to them in some way? Are they influencing him? And what about Vladimir Putin? I mean, Russia and the Russia scandal seems like ancient history right now. But you and I remember that summit in Helsinki where Trump was outrageously deferential to the autocratic president of Russia. So who is anyone pulling the strings on Donald Trump? And if so, who are they?
He doesn't have what you call a couple of best friends. I mean, he's on the phone a lot to Rudy Giuliani. Of course, it used to be Michael Cohen, who's now in jail, right?
Mm-hmm.
His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has enormous power. He's probably the deputy president. Canadians, by the way, spoke not very highly, but quite highly of Kushner in helping with the new trade deal. He would go to Trump and say, "Hey, this provision isn't all that bad. Canadians, we can allow this and we can allow that." And so Kushner has become a huge force. Mike Pompeo, he loves Pompeo because Pompeo is such a toady. He's a bootlicker, been over there, does everything that Trump wants him to do. And he's in trouble, as you mentioned earlier, for firing the inspector general, who was, among other things, has nailed him for having departmental employees walk his dog and iron his shirts, that kind of thing, right? So, are you still there? I am. I thought I lost you for a second there. So those are some of the people that he relies on. The relationship with his wife, I hesitate to comment on that. Nobody seems to have a read on that, whether he listens to her, whether she gives him policy advice. I have no idea about that. Now, you mentioned Russiagate, and what's totally forgotten now, of course, and isn't it unbelievable? Here's a president who was impeached by the House of Representatives in December over on the Ukraine file, the shenanigans there. And then we had the trial in January, world headlines, and it's totally forgotten now. I haven't seen mention of impeachment in a month or two in Washington. I mean, it's the news happens so much. But it's another trick of Trump's, by the way. You're saying that he controls the agenda. When he gets in trouble, he'll just come out and make some crazy statement to switch the news cycle onto something else, right? But on the Russia thing, he's turned tables on that. He's got the Democrats on the defense of that. The Mueller report, right-wing journalists are calling it what happened there as talking about the New York Times and Washington Post, calling it one of the worst journalistic fiascos of all time, having them given so much coverage to the Russian collusion story. Well, in fact, there were a lot of people arrested as a result of that. There are all kinds of contacts with the Russians and the Trump campaign. It wasn't exactly that, and there were all these allegations of obstruction of justice too that came out of that report. So it wasn't exactly like the report totally exonerated the president, but he has made a lot of headway in turning that whole story around and saying that it was the Democrats who were at fault here. They're after me. They abused the process. Obama abused the process, and therefore we're down to Obamagate. And you'll hear more of that in the campaign as well.
I'd like to ask a last question, and this concerns Canada. The United States is always very important to Canada. It's extremely important at the moment. So for instance, here in British Columbia, we have the chief financial officer of Huawei under detention, undergoing an extradition process because of the Trump administration. And as a result, China is turning the screws on Canada, and it has been and probably will be for several years to come. We also have this pandemic with the United States being at the epicenter of that pandemic now, and the longest undefended border in the world, which at least temporarily is closed to non-essential travel. But that's not locked in place, that closure, indefinitely. And the Trudeau government has to continue to negotiate with the Trump administration. And I haven't mentioned the other 150 files of crucial importance to Canada that involve this president and his administration. I guess the question is there any strategy for Canada apart from keeping our heads down and being nice to Donald Trump in the hope that Joe Biden becomes the next president?
Yeah, first of all, in recent weeks and months, there's been so much at the top of the heap in terms of important files that Canada's really down the list. I haven't heard Canada mentioned at the White House for quite a while, as a matter of fact. There's just too many important, bigger things on Trump's plate. I think that your idea of laying low is probably what the Trudeau government is thinking, and and trying to follow. The whole thing with China, we still got the two Canadians being detained there, so we're still talking to Pompeo about getting help from China on that. But the U.S. is in a rift with China now, like Canada is, so I don't see those detainees getting released for quite some time. I don't see the Canadian relations or U.S.-China relations improving. I think there is going to be a China-U.S. Cold War, and that could ensue for quite a long time. On the trade front, we're in a very the United States is still enormously important for us, and we have to hope. Canadians have to hope that the United States economy gets back up and running. From the economic point of view, it's probably good for Canada that Trump wants to start reopening and is urging some states and it's giving them that leeway to do that, because that might get the economy pumped up, which of course would help in terms of our trade volumes, which are so enormously important to us. So from that point of view, the reliance on the American economy and what Trump does is very, very important to this country, as it always has been. I mean, the precedent for this, you have to go way back to the 1930s in the Great Depression, and fortunately at that time, Herbert Hoover was the president, and Canadian Prime Minister did not get along with Hoover at the time, and Franklin Roosevelt came in and, turned the economy around, brought in the New Deal and so on. I think the hope now is that, Trump, the Hoover, will exit. Joe Biden will come in and start a major economic recovery. He won't be an FDR, but will be a big improvement over the president that Canada has had.
Well, as you said, 80% of Canadians would share your hope for a change in the president. If Trump refuses to accept losing the election, can Justin Trudeau maintain the heads down, nice guy approach to the Trump administration? At what point do we take a position like we're taking with regards to China in Hong Kong and actually call out a move to authoritarianism? Or is Canada destined to always have to get along with the United States, regardless of what's happening in Washington?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, if it reached a point where he lost the election and was disputing a result and refusing to step down, then I think the Canadian Prime Minister could get away with, starting to raise hell about it. The problem if Trudeau speaks out now is that, they have this border arrangement right now, and we have a guy like the trade maestro in the White House, this guy, Peter Navarro, a the protectionist hawk who is willing at all times to hit Canada with any tariff imaginable. And if Trudeau annoys Trump, and Trump is easily annoyable, he could just, levy this or that or the next thing, or toy with the border in any way he wants. I think the border is going to be shut for non-essential traffic for months and months and months to come. I think the United States is going to want to open it for the sake of getting their economy rolling, and because the coronavirus problem hasn't hit with the incidents in Canada as the United States, so it isn't as big a gamble from that respect for them to open the border either. But from our point of view, we're going to want to keep it closed probably for the rest of the year because of the incidence of the virus there. Unless the miracle cure comes along in terms of a vaccine, and so this could lead to a big clash in terms of when and how to open the border. That could be something to really watch.
Well, you're giving us fantastic guidance as to where to focus our attention in the weeks and months ahead. Lawrence, this has been an enormous pleasure. We'll get you physically to Salt Spring Island again, hopefully soon. But thank you so much for your time, and thanks as well for your many superb columns. They're a must-read. You're moving to Washington to cover the Trump administration was inspired and a great service to all Canadians. So thank you for everything.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's sort of covering Trump, I guess, from a journalist point of view. You couldn't have a greater source of material. He's the most newsworthy leader probably ever. He can't stand a day when he's not in the headlines. If he's not in the headlines, he'll create a bad headline. Just even put out bad news just to get in the headline. Most extraordinary character I've ever seen.
Well, what's good for your journalism is not necessarily good for the world. So we'll watch this space, and we'll come back at some point and talk about it.
Absolutely right with that point, and be great to get back out to the island. Have fun up there.
Okay, I look forward to it. Thanks so much, and good night.